Chapter 3. Biological Nature. Our blue planet seems to be the liveliest in the vast universe, boasting a collection of living individuals known as organisms. Organisms possess metabolic and genetic functions that provide vitality to the Earth through their autonomous and strategic decision-making, along with their sense of life. Despite continuing to speculate and explore the possibility of life existing on some planets beyond Earth, for now, biological forms on Earth remain unique among the materials accessible to us. At the molecular, atomic, and even more microscopic particle level, the composition of living organisms differs insignificantly from that of non-living things like sand, ore, and magma. However, only the structure of the molecules and the way they are combined and assembled make living organisms more complex than non-living things. In the previous chapter, we conducted a thorough analysis of 7 features that have emerged during the evolution of organisms. The manifestations were often confusing and contradictory, thereby leading to the emergence of many hypotheses, possibilities, and questions. This book, next, will investigate the nature of organisms, their origin, and physiological functioning to address the aforementioned inquiries. What is the nature of the bioactivity and ecology of every organism on Earth, including humans? What is the logic and significance behind the emergence, survival, and continuity of organisms? Energy balance. An organism is a self-organized system developed to regulate energy balance. Metabolism is one of the most essential mechanisms for achieving equilibrium in the system. Other mechanisms include energy stabilization and energy planning. In a completely open environment, the structure, gradient, and magnitude of energy have a significant level of unpredictability. The organism does not benefit from all forms of energy, and some can even be harmful or deadly. Maintaining equilibrium is not an easy task for organisms. Organisms must adopt a set of strategies to succeed in a specific time and space through constant trials, experiments, reproduction, and consolidation. Every species has a drive for immortality, from the origin of species to differentiation, further evolution, and differentiation of traits regardless of the process. The immortality mentioned here does not imply immortality in the broad sense. Nonetheless, the mechanism that a species uses to replicate its life is transmitted from one generation to another and never discarded. Similar to a family heirloom or a religious artifact, every successor is responsible and obligated to pass it on. From the beginning of life until today, the Earth has undergone billions of years of evolution, and numerous species possess genes that are almost identical to one another. Living organisms inherit the life code initiated by their common ancestors and ensure its passage to their offspring. Living organisms on Earth are material entities as well as life forms, aptly called the successful ones possessing bioactivity in the universe, at least until the present time. Energy and its balance. Biologists, ecologists, and nutritionists typically use energy, matter, and information as the main dimensions for studying the flow of energy, cycling of matter, and transfer of information within and between organisms, populations, and communities. This book combines all these dimensions into a single one, which is energy, providing a deeper perspective. Physics has shown us that mass and energy are equivalent, and the cycling of matter is just a transition in mass with an exchange of energy. Organisms take in energy in the form of food, while the loss of matter is equivalent to the loss of energy. Similar to inorganic matter observed in nature, organisms consist of diverse microscopic particles, and interparticle forces drive constant movement. As a result, strictly speaking, organisms are supposed to be considered energy complexes, while matter, including organisms, is an external expression of different energy forms. The principle of entropy dictates that heat can only naturally transfer from an object with high temperature to one with low temperature, as stated by the second law of thermodynamics. However, the energy forms in an organism's activity area, or a closed system that includes an organism, and its surrounding environment may not always align with the organism's form of energy or be effective in its conversion and employment. To sustain life and counteract the rise of entropy, an organism needs to preserve the critical stability of its macromolecular energy structure, regulate body temperature, and safeguard intracellular and intercellular functions from uncontrolled interferences and external erosions of energy. Distinct energy forms, structures, and transformation strategies have evolved among different species since the dawn of life on Earth. Autotrophic organisms such as plants, algae, and certain bacteria employ light energy to synthesize complex organic matter like carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins from carbon dioxide, water, or hydrogen sulfide for storage and usage. Some types of bacteria are incapable of utilizing light energy. Nonetheless, they can utilize the energy from the oxidation of particular inorganic substances in their external environment to generate organic matter to facilitate their vital functions. One example of nutrient conversion is performed by nitrifying bacteria in soil. These microorganisms convert ammonia, NH3, present in soil into nitrite, HNO2, and nitrate, HNO3, by an oxidation process that releases energy. The energy is used by the bacteria to synthesize organic matter. In contrast, humans and other animals rely on the digestive system to break down and absorb organic matter that is readily available. The organic matter is then converted to an energy structure that can be utilized by the organism. While the form of energy at the molecular level is essentially the same, the energy structure at the cellular level varies across different organisms such as animals, plants, bacteria, fungi, and others. Energy at the molecular level is commonly referred to as nutrients, including proteins, lipids, carbohydrates, minerals, vitamins, cellulose, water, and other related substances. Following decomposition, nutrients are reassembled within an organism to form the energy required to drive its biological processes. Continuous and stable nutrient supply is crucial for an organism's processes such as growth, development, exploration, defense, repair, and reproduction. Without these essential substances, these processes cannot be achieved. The energy sources of biological organisms are more complex than those of the artificial intelligence or robots we have created. Unlike the artificial biomimetic organisms, living things can evolve multiple ways of using energy depending on their environment rather than depending on a single energy source. Different organisms use various energy sources such as craters on the ocean floor, solar energy, energy released from various chemical reactions, and chemical energy within their organism. These energy sources can be continuous, intermittent, or discrete, and are used to varying degrees by different organisms. The nutrients required by the organism provide heat for vital activities, in addition to replenishing the energy losses caused by the construction and repair of the organism's tissues. For instance, by eating beef, we ingest protein molecules from the cow which provide calories to the body. A calorie, a unit of heat, is essentially a unit of energy. Carbohydrates and fats are additional sources of calories for the body. Each of these three nutrients contributes varying amounts of calories to the body. Protein provides 4 kilocalories per gram of calories, carbohydrates provide 4 kilocalories per gram of calories, and fats provide 9 kilocalories per gram of calories. Other essential nutrients are minerals such as calcium, iron, zinc, copper, manganese, chromium, selenium, fluorine, and other macro and trace elements required by the organism. Their primary function is closely related to the vitality of life, which plays a vital physiological role in critical positions with a relatively small supply. These elements combine with proteins and other organic groups to form biological macromolecules, such as enzymes, hormones, and vitamins, that perform critical physiological and biochemical functions. Trace elements are also vital substances that form carriers and electron transfer systems within the body. Iron, for instance, which is found in hemoglobin and myoglobin, plays a significant part in the transportation and storage of oxygen. Although trace elements in minerals do not directly provide heat to organisms, they take part in the transportation and conversion of heat-containing substances. Metabolism is a vital mechanism for living organisms to maintain life and involves the exchange of energy between an organism and its external environment, as well as energy transformation within the organism. The process can be categorized into two stages. During the first phase, assimilation takes place, in which the organism acquires nutrients from the outside environment and converts them into energy ready to be used. In the second phase, known as metabolism, molecules that are stored in the organism are oxidized and broken down, and the organism gets rid of metabolic waste. Metabolism refers to the organism's regulation of the intensity and manner of energy exchange and conversion to sustain a balance between the overall input and output of energy. Typically, equilibrium refers to the steady state in which self-organizing mechanisms of an organism balance the multiple opposing effects in such a way that they counteract each other, resulting in an overall stabilization. Equilibrium is not equivalent to an utter state of stability, but rather involves regular fluctuation within a defined limit. To maintain its bioactivity, a species must develop strategies to achieve dynamic equilibrium at various levels, such as within each body, within symbioses, between generations, within populations and communities, and among organisms and non-organisms, leading to a relatively stable balance. For an individual organism, the primary goal of an equilibrium strategy is survival, and it involves addressing the following essential equilibrium issues. A. Maintaining the balance of energy intake, consumption, and excretion. B. Managing the balance of energy competition and cooperation in a symbiotic relationship. C. Maintaining the balance between energy storage and the burden on the body. Reproduction is another purpose of the equilibrium strategy. Biological populations must solve the following several fundamental equilibrium problems. A. Maintaining a balance between fecundity and longevity is important. B. Balancing the density and diversity of population distribution is crucial. C. Balancing heredity and variation in the reproduction process is essential. Ecological equilibrium refers to the total energy input and the fluctuation of balance between biological communities within an ecosystem of a particular area. As the total energy input to the ecosystem increases, the system becomes more complex. When the energy balance between communities is less stable, species diversity becomes increasingly important. In warm tropical regions and near hot springs on the seafloor, the total quantity of energy input is greater and remains at a sufficiently high density for an extended period of time. As a result, the density of organisms in both ecosystems is higher. Energy constantly and quickly flows and transforms between producers, consumers, and decomposers, maintaining a high level of biological individuals all the time. As the population grows, energetic competition between species and populations intensifies, leading to the development of organisms in the region towards more structural complexity and functional individuality. In an ecosystem, a significant fluctuation in the community's equilibrium signifies that the original energy structure and distribution have been disturbed, leading to discrete and evenly distributed energy. The abundance of discrete energy creates more diversity in a community, providing opportunities for new autotrophic species to feed where the energy is distributed with appropriate strategies. Other species at the top of the food or energy chain vary, depending on the degree of energy discretization. Ultimately, the ecosystem can achieve a high degree of adaptation, coordination, and unity among organisms, between communities, and with the environment by changing the flow of energy. Internal equilibrium of organisms. In nutrition, energy balance refers to the equalization of external food intake with the energy lost by the organism. This ensures that the overall loss and intake of energy in the organism are balanced. This is, of course, a fundamental concept in nutrition. Energy balance does not imply that the energy input and output of an organism must balance each day, but rather that the average values of an organism's energy intake and loss tend to be equal over time. To achieve energy balance, it is essential to consider caloric balance first. An organism's body temperature is typically stable or fluctuates within a range determined by its equilibrium strategy, lest there be deleterious effects on its metabolism. Disruptions to heat balance in the environment or temperature extremes caused by severe weather can exacerbate heat loss or excess in an organism through heat transfer. At this point, the organism must have a contingency strategy to adjust its physiological functions in order to significantly reduce the heat imbalance. As the root system of plants is fixed in the soil and cannot escape autonomously like animals, temperature effects have a more significant impact on plants. The optimal temperature is necessary for average plant growth. Temperatures that are too high or too low can stress the plant and affect its growth and development. When the temperature drops to the lowest limit that a plant can tolerate, photosynthesis slows down and the fluidity of its cell membranes deteriorates. Simultaneously, the nutrients taken up and transported via the plant's root system are also impacted. Inadequate transportation of photosynthetic products and minerals to growing organs may lead to plants becoming thin, stunted, or perishing from nutrient deficiencies. To reverse the thermal imbalance caused by low temperatures, plants typically activate thermoregulatory mechanisms and modify their original physiological functions to reduce damage. They accomplish this by suspending part of their metabolism, decreasing metabolic intensity, and going dormant. Overall, plants respond to low-temperature damage in three main ways. A. Modifying fluidity of the cell membrane by increasing unsaturated fatty acid content in the cytoplasmic membrane and reducing the phase transition temperature of the plasma membrane. B. Regulating cellular osmotic pressure by synthesizing inorganic ions absorbed and stored from outside sources, or by breaking down carbohydrates which produce organic compounds necessary for osmoregulation, such as soluble sugars and proline. C. Activating the ROS scavenging system to eliminate excess reactive oxygen species and lessen heat consumption caused by ROS, thereby enhancing plant freeze resistance. When ambient temperatures are excessively high, plants must also regulate their temperature. Excess body heat can be eliminated by increasing evapotranspiration or increasing the cuticle area of leaves to reflect sunlight and reduce heat absorption. The thermoregulatory mechanisms in animals differ between ectotherms and endotherms. Endothermic animals, including birds and mammals, have a temperature regulation center in their hypothalamus, and their feathers or hair have thermoregulatory functions. In hot weather or during intense exercise, blood vessels in the skin dilate, causing blood flow to increase, facilitating more heat to be released from the body. Simultaneously, appetite decreases slightly to reduce calorie intake through eating. Some endothermic animals increase the secretion of sweat glands to speed up body heat dissipation. Additionally, body heat is dissipated through exhalation, excretion, and defecation. Endotherm's thermoregulatory mechanism is reversed in cold weather. Under these conditions, blood vessels under the skin constrict, reducing blood flow to the surface and slowing the rate of heat loss. Instead, appetite increases, triggering an increase in thyroxine secretion by the thyroid gland and accelerating cell respiration to generate more heat. Ectotherms, like fish, amphibians, and reptiles, maintain a thermal balance by adjusting their environmental temperature in a consistent fashion. However, when the magnitude of ambient temperature changes is too abrupt, ectotherms will use changes in their habitat or hibernate to prevent excessive changes in their body temperature. Multicellular organisms have major cells that form symbiotic relationships with unicellular organisms like bacteria and fungi. Nevertheless, each member of the symbiosis maintains an independent life form. Following the principle of achieving a win-win situation through cooperation, the symbiosis should maintain balance in energy distribution according to some agreement that meets the energy needs of each party in the complex symbiosis. The human body has a diverse distribution of commensal bacteria, which can be found on the surface of the body, such as the skin, eyes, and respiratory mucosa, as well as the internal organs. The digestive system contains the highest concentration of symbiotic bacteria, particularly in the colon. Symbiotic bacteria form a mutually beneficial relationship with the body. On one hand, symbiotic bacteria thrive in our warm and damp organs, consuming the rich nutrients and enjoying the stable and secure environment. On the other hand, symbiotic bacteria help digest and metabolize food while assisting the body in fighting harmful non-symbiotic bacteria. In strict terms, symbiotic bacteria are the neglected organs of the body. Common bacterial residents of the gut include Bacteroidetes, Lactobacillus, Escherichia coli, Enterococcus, and so on. There exist other non-resident floras, such as Staphylococcus aureus, Pseudomonas aeruginosa, Escherichia coli, and so on. Under normal circumstances, the resident flora adheres to their respective functions, refrain from invading one another, rely on one another, and cooperate to balance the proportion of various flora types and maintain the symbiotic order. If there is an imbalance in the supply and distribution of energy to different colonies, the symbiosis may exhibit symptoms associated with colony dysbiosis. When a colony receives an excess of allocated energy, it will replicate rapidly and increase in numbers. If the colony's numbers grow to the point where they have no other place to live and must migrate to unsuitable sites, they may become conditionally pathogenic. For instance, the presence of E. coli in the abdominal cavity or urinary tract can lead to peritonitis and urinary tract infections. Conversely, if the energy input to the symbiont is inadequate or some colonies receive insufficient energy, the distribution and number of these colonies will significantly decrease. As a result, the sites where they reside become sparsely populated or even vacant, occupied by microorganisms that are not in a symbiotic relationship. Unfriendly bacteria may take advantage of the opportunity to replicate in large numbers, expand their territory, and harm neighboring bacteria. Dysbiosis of this nature can lead to disease. For instance, an excess of Clostridium difficile can produce large amounts of toxins, resulting in pseudomembranous enteritis. It is hard to generalize the relationship between the master cell and the various floras scattered throughout the symbiotic body's harsh living environment. Sometimes they compete, sometimes cooperate, and in some ways they constrain each other while being interdependent. This situation is similar to that of Europe before the two world wars, and China during the spring and autumn period, when different entities contended against each other, fighting for survival while also cooperating to stay alive. Though the wars were ceaseless, all sides required a brief armistice to rejuvenate. Thus, it is always challenging to maintain the vital energy equilibrium in a symbiotic ecosystem subjected to numerous factors. Moreover, distinct symbionts possess unique energy types and structures, and their necessitations for nutrient categories and levels differ. Such differences in requirements arise from the energy equilibrium tactics evolved by each species. Humans have a highly remarkable omnivorous nature, which characterizes their energy balance strategy by two features: energy type diversity and multi-point balance of energy structures. In essence, the human body requires a diverse food intake to fulfill the energy diversity requirement. And even if this requirement is not met, the body can still reach a balance by adjusting the energy structure to a new position. Nonetheless, the intake of essential energy must meet the body's minimum needs to achieve balance through energy conversion in the new state. Food contains various energy types, such as nutritious energy that is beneficial and toxic energy that is harmful to the body. Levels of nutritious and toxic energy can also vary in a high or low range. Food can contain various energy types, such as nutritious energy that is beneficial and toxic energy that is harmful to the body. Furthermore, there exists a differentiation between the practical worth of nutritious energy and poisonous energy. A food component is considered edible if the energy required to decompose and transform it is lower than the energy that can be absorbed by the body. Alternately, food is considered edible when the energy consumption ratio of intake is greater than 1. Highly nutritious energies have a high energy consumption ratio during intake, whereas low nutritive energies are the opposite. Highly toxic energies are those that have an intake energy consumption ratio that is unfavorable. The ratio is less than 1 for both human cells and symbiotic bacteria in a community. However, a low level of toxicity could be detrimental for human cells, yet beneficial for some symbiotic species. Under normal conditions, human cells and symbiotic bacteria each require their own specific sources of energy. In addition, symbiotic bacteria can convert low-toxicity energies into forms that can be readily utilized by human cells as nutrition. Insufficient energy intake causes an imbalance in energy distribution within the symbiosis, leading to conflicts. High consumption of toxic energy can destroy the vitality of human cells and symbiotic bacteria, resulting in widespread conflicts in the organism. Moreover, malignant tumors, tuberculosis, hyperthyroidism, severe trauma, and other wasting diseases, as well as the heavy usage of antibiotics and hormones, can lead to imbalances. In the event of a wasting disease, the body overconsumes energy, leading to an imbalance in the body's overall energy. The reason for this is that the body's repair mechanisms and immune system use a significant amount of the ingested and stored energy to replenish the troops and safeguard the vitality of the affected areas. As a result, symbiotic bacteria become starved, which may lead to their death or rebellion, further exacerbating the imbalance within the symbiosis. Overusing antibiotics or hormones at this time could exacerbate the situation. The outcome depends on the body's energy conversion efficiency and the balance between storage and body burden, among other factors. A healthy organism requires energy reserves to maintain primary metabolism and vital activities, as well as to sustain emergency needs. However, an excess of energy reserves can be detrimental to the body and require each species to find an appropriate storage balance strategy. In the essential balance of energy input and output, the organism prioritizes high nutritional energy, uses lower nutritional energy gradually, and excretes the least nutritional and toxic energy. Animals store excess energy in a categorized manner when energy input exceeds output. One category is storing specific carbohydrates in glycogen, which is necessary for high-intensity exercise in emergencies, like escaping or predation. The second category is storing fat, which is the primary storage mode. This is because fat is more energy-dense than other nutrients and requires less energy expenses during the conversion and storing process due to a lower thermogenic effect. This more economical mode of storage enables animals to survive long periods of starvation, harsh cold climates, and tolerate the energy demands of prolonged exercises. Excess fat storage increases the burden on the body. This condition primarily shows up as weight gain, reduced exercise capacity, and muscle wasting. It also reduces the efficiency of the circulatory systems, such as blood vessels and heart, along with an imbalance in triglyceride composition and transport and liver function decline. In short, when the fat content of an organism surpasses the requirements of the internal and external environment, the organism becomes more vulnerable to physiological disorders and predation. When this happens, adipose tissue starts to secrete leptin, a protein hormone that regulates fat storage, boosts the organism's metabolism, curbs appetite, controls body weight, and maintains balance between storage and loading. Due to both natural selection and the influence of leptin, the accumulation of fat in organisms within the wild is somewhat limited. An alternative is protein storage. Typically, organisms avoid storing protein because of its high thermogenic effect. Storing protein is not worth the high cost of maintaining caloric balance. Nevertheless, two exceptions exist to this general principle. The first exception is to increase muscle protein as necessary for sustained, intense physical activity. This results in a conversion of dietary protein into muscle to improve predation efficiency or the likelihood of survival. The second exception is to increase body size, thus reducing the likelihood of being attacked by smaller predators or being captured. Larger bodies require more energy, which is not an issue when ample food is available. But, when the nutritional energy availability in the environment significantly drops, species with relatively larger average body size become less resilient. Protein storage cannot support unlimited body size for an organism. Despite an increased energy intake, a body's composition and weight tolerance cannot change drastically. Size can only increase moderately. A species needs a corresponding change in storage balance strategy, i.e., genetics, for a drastic change in body composition. Therefore, trial and error in evolution is the only way to find the best strategy to support overall body size in species that achieve substantial enlargement while maintaining viability and adaptability. Following the evolution from unicellular to multicellular organisms, the differentiation of cells and organs adds a level of complexity that makes it challenging to maintain energy balance in an organism. Basic bioelectric-based neurotransmission mechanisms can no longer fully support the biological requirements of regulated equilibrium positions. As a result, organisms have progressively developed self-reward mechanisms to fulfill such requirements. The self-reward system comprises neural circuits that strengthen specific behaviors that are essential for the internal homeostasis of higher organisms, including mating, food intake, social connectivity, and more. Dopamine, endorphins, and adrenaline are neurotransmitters that are vital to the self-reward system. Every release of these neurotransmitters in an organism acts as a reward for the organizers and performers of physiological functions. Life activities can sometimes pose challenging circumstances. The subtlety of the self-reward mechanism is that it motivates the organs participating in the activity to collaborate more enthusiastically and perform more difficult tasks to maintain the energy balance of the organism. Species evolutionary balance. The energy balance of a species consists of both the intra-individual equilibrium as well as the evolutionary balance of the population. Essentially, evolutionary balance is a set of strategies meant to enhance the fitness of a species in its respective population. Achieving evolutionary equilibrium is not an easy feat for a species given the typical complexity and competitiveness of its environment. Searching for new equilibrium strategies, developing new mechanisms for creating balance, and regularly revising existing strategies and mechanisms in response to environmental changes is crucial. In order to continue passing on the genes of the species, it is essential to ensure that each population maintains a balanced reproduction. When energy resources are relatively scarce in a species' habitat, appropriate reproductive and longevity strategies must be chosen to maintain the population's energy balance. Reproductive strategies consist of sexual maturity, estrus cycle, number of eggs, gestation period, birthing conditions, lactation period, and more. Reproductive strategies vary considerably among species, and they are scarcely identical in the same species in distinct populations. Humans and Canadian pond geese are good examples of species that reach sexual maturity several years after birth. This highlights their differing estrus cycle strategies. After 8 months of birth, rabbits reach sexual maturity and are capable of reproducing 10 to 30 offspring annually. The Drosophila melanogaster reaches sexual maturity after 10 to 14 days from birth and can produce up to 400 offspring per year. For instance, in vitro fertilized most fish and most amphibians ovulate hundreds to thousands of eggs at a time. On the other hand, only a few dozen or fewer eggs are ovulated by those among the few in vivo, fertilized fish, amphibians, mollusks, reptiles, birds, insects, and mammals. Certain species have adapted to a limited energy environment, with a reproductive strategy of producing multiple offspring, high fecundity, and short or zero incubation periods. The species would have to adjust their longevity strategy accordingly to guarantee a high survival rate of the offspring, that is, by decreasing the average lifespan of the species. In an environment with a restricted energy supply, the number of individuals switching between generations should be increased to ensure sufficient offspring survival. Highly fertile hamsters reach sexual maturity at about 2 months old and have an optimal reproductive period between 5 and 8 months of age. They breed from April to October each year and can produce between 3 to 5 nests with 4 to 8 offspring each. Theoretically, the hamster population would increase geometrically if energy resources were unlimited. In reality, the growth rate of hamsters is constrained by various factors such as insufficient energy resources, predation, and disease. When the hamster population density exceeds the capacity of the environment, the growth rate drops to 0. In nature, the majority of the population size remains relatively constant. Due to factors such as total environmental energy, distribution of energy within the ecosystem, capacity for energy intake, and competition, the population density of one species in a community of organisms remains relatively constant in comparison to other species. This state is known as the natural equilibrium of the population, and the population density during this state is referred to as the equilibrium density. Since the above factors limit the natural balance, no population can grow beyond the maximum limit of environmental stress. Population density is an essential factor in regulating population size to attain equilibrium. It enables the population to return to the equilibrium density level after going beyond it. Season, infectious disease, and parasites are some of the factors that can bring back the population size to its original equilibrium density. When a community's energy structure and distribution are primarily constant, the density and distribution of a group of species will gradually stabilize at a dynamic equilibrium. Many environmental and biological factors can affect birth and death rates in a population. However, populations have the ability to self-regulate and maintain balance through regulation. This kind of regulation is commonly achieved through population differentiation, which involves the movement of individuals both into and out of the population. An overpopulated area forces some individuals to move out and establish new populations, hence expanding the species distribution over time. If the population density is too low, individuals from other populations may migrate or different populations may merge, leading to a decrease in the species distribution. Eventually, regulation ensures that the population density remains within a certain range and enhances its adaptive capacity for survival and reproduction. Significant changes in the environment's energy compel populations to find a novel balance through evolution. Their evolutionary path entails making various attempts to balance through genetic inheritance and variation, as they look for a new balancing strategy that best adapts them to the environment. In a stable, balanced ecosystem, the structure and distribution of energy is mostly constant, with most of the energy flowing within and between different communities. Various populations in a community occupy specific levels of energy locus and consume what is essential for their survival without interruption. For reasons of ratio of energy efficiency, different populations at the same energy locus are generally at peace, and no one is tempted to start a costly confrontation. However, the Earth's ecological march always requires adaptive resilience to cope with change, and apparent peace does not necessarily indicate the absence of secret rivalry or preparation for war. To mitigate the adverse effects of potential environmental changes, populations must employ suitable balancing strategies to safeguard their energy loci while also exploring limited options to extend their energy loci. One typical defense strategy entails mitigating the effects of genetic drift and ensuring genetic diversity across alleles. Usually, genetic drift tends to fix a specific allele and minimize genetic diversity. To counter the effects of genetic drift, species must adjust their population density, partitioning, and mating ratios, which increases the range and rate of gene flow. Genetic diversity serves as a potent defense during a siege. During a siege war, genetic diversification acts as the defensive side, enabling the formation of a more functional group of troops. They can build impregnable defense lines at various directional and distance locations from the city. The expansion strategy primarily involves enlarging the gene pool by adding new alleles through genetic mutations. Adding new alleles is akin to the addition of new combat functions for soldiers. New weapons do not necessarily translate into new energy loci that can be fought over, as this can only occur after actual combat takes place. The ecosystem balance gets disrupted when geological catastrophes, climatic disasters, plagues, or massive invasions of new species happen. Accordingly, some populations suffer from elevated mortality rates that significantly reduce the number of individuals, destroy the original energy locus structure, and cause imbalanced population distribution on each energy locus. At this stage, the readiness function in the genetic makeup of each species becomes operational. On one hand, the readiness function protects the original but undersupplied energy loci or enhances their distribution. On the other hand, it starts to control new or even higher-ordered energy loci. During the genetic war, all parties involved in competing for energy sources strive to balance their offense and defense tactics. The species avoid having their energy loci taken by other species and aim to grow their energy reserves to gain a competitive survival advantage. If an appropriate balance between offense and defense is not achieved and there are passive or risky approaches, the gene pool could lead the entire species toward extinction with no chance of recovery.